Patent searching is a total scam, and it's a way that some patent attorneys use the fear and inexperience of their clients against them to make some extra money in their practice. So, for example, for me, I'm a patent attorney, and I can't remember the last time I did a prior art search. At the same time, I can't remember the last time that we were surprised by prior art that came up during examination that ultimately prevented us from getting a patent. So, big companies know better, and they don't waste their time and money doing patent or prior art searching. Successful startups, same thing. They don't waste their time and money on patent or prior art searching. So in this video, I'm going to explain why that is, why successful companies don't do prior art searching, why it's a total scam, why you should be actually spending your time and money in other places, and then also some of the few exceptions where you should actually consider doing a patent or prior art search. So to get a patent, your invention needs to be new and non-obvious over the prior art. And this comes up during the examination process. So an examiner finally gets your case, typically after 1 to 3 years after you file your non-provisional patent application, and they'll do a prior art search to determine whether what you have claimed is new and non-obvious over the prior art. So what can this prior art be? So it can be issued patents, it can be publications of pending applications, but really it can be any sort of technology disclosure. It could be actual products, it could be catalogs of products, it could be blog posts that describe technology, it could be a scientific paper, it could be a YouTube video. So really anything that describes technology is prior art. So you'll hear the terms prior art search or patent search. And the reason why sometimes people will just do a patent search, which is going to be just of issued patents or pending patent applications that have published, is because typically in the examination process, I would say maybe 95% of the time, the rejections are going to be based off of these issued patents or published applications, not off of other sorts of prior art, such as YouTube videos, blog posts, things like that. Although I do get rejections based on those things. Sometimes examiners will literally cite YouTube videos. But again, 95% of the time, it's going to be issued patents and published applications. So that's why you may do a patent search, but a prior art search obviously is a lot broader. So it's important to understand that kind of as a baseline thing. Now, it's counterintuitive. So you would naturally think, okay, well, I'm going to go in this examination process. I want to know what the prior art is going to be before the examiner cites it. I want to know whether my invention is going to be patentable. So wouldn't I want to do some sort of search to determine what sort of prior art is out there and what rejections I'm going to be facing in the examination process? Well, that's absolutely not the case. Surprisingly and counterintuitively, very few people do prior art searches, and the ones who do usually are being scammed. So one of the first reasons why people often think that it's essential or really important to do a prior art search before filing a patent application is because they think that patents are just a binary thing, or that it's just a matter of getting a patent or not, when that's completely not the case. So patents are more about having a potential spectrum of protection. For example, you can have a really broad patent that covers a ton of different variations, or you can have a really specific narrow patent that only covers one very, very specific embodiment of the invention, which is going to have less value. And that's going to be determined in the examination process. And when it really comes down to it, for most inventions, especially if you do a really good job on drafting the patent application, and for most inventions, it's going to be more a question of whether you can get a broad patent or whether you can get a really specific narrow one, not a question of whether you're just going to get a patent or not. Okay, so that's the first thing that people always think is like, well, I just want to know, am I going to be able to get a patent? And usually that's not the problem. The question is it going to be broad or is it going to be narrow? And then that comes to the examination process. The examination process is very, very subjective. So it really depends on the examiner you get assigned to. So for instance, one examiner is going to say, I found a lot of prior art, but it wouldn't be obvious to combine these things. And so I'm going to let you get a patent on this, and I'm going to give you one that's really broad. Whereas another examiner is going to look at the exact same case and is going to say, you know what? I found a bunch of prior art. It would be obvious to combine the elements of these things to come to your invention. I'm not going to give you a patent at all. Or if I do, it's going to be so narrow and so specific that it's going to be completely worthless. So when it comes to doing prior art searching, it's a waste of time and money to do this speculative and expensive research when it really is going to come down to the specific examiner that you get. And two, it's going to be a spectrum of protection. You don't know whether you're going to get a broad or narrow patent until you get in front of that one examiner. So prior art searching is a huge waste of time and money. One of the main times I get approached to do prior art searching is when folks are in early stages of development and they don't want to spend a lot of time or money on something that isn't ultimately going to be patentable. And again, unfortunately, it's usually pretty worthless to do a prior art search at this point. The reason is because patentability tends to be in the details of the product. And at early stages, you just have a broad general idea of what the product is going to look like. You don't have the actual details of what the product really will be fleshed out. And because, again, it's going to be in those specific details of the actual product you end up developing, that's going to be where patentability hinges. Doing an early prior art search really isn't going to give you a lot of information. Typically, yes, there's going to be tons of prior art that's going to be related to your invention. Even if there's not one exact thing that's exactly the same, there's going to be stuff that is going to be similar where the examiner is going to be able to pull elements from multiple references and say, well, it would be obvious to combine these things to come to your broad general idea. And so it's really worthless at the early stages because you don't have the details. It's very cart before the horse. So people, they say, well, I don't want to waste the money, but well, unfortunately, you have to go through that time of developing the product, coming up with the actual details of how it's actually going to work, the way it's going to be configured. That's when you actually have the details that are going to be relevant to a prior art search. But then at that point, it doesn't really make any sense to do that analysis because you've spent all the time, you spent all the money. And at the same time, you should just file your patent application. Don't waste your time and money doing all of this analysis. It is much better just to draft and file your patent application regardless of whether it is ultimately patentable. So of course, I hear you saying, what the hell are you talking about? Of course it's important that my invention is patentable. That's really critical to my whole business. And of course you have to have an issued patent, but that's actually not the case. So the way that successful startups actually get going is through patent pending status. And that lasts a long, long time. And I have a ton of clients who have gotten substantial traction with investors, with selling the product, and have even made exits well before the examination process even begins, or even before they know whether they're going to get an issued patent or not. So it sounds crazy, but honestly, whether something is patentable or not, especially at early stages and getting traction with a startup, doesn't actually matter. So part of it is the length of the patent process. So for instance, you file a provisional patent application that lasts for 1 year. Then you file a non-provisional patent application, which waits in line for 1 to 3 years before examination begins. And once examination begins, it can be months, if not years, before you know whether or not you're going to be able to get a patent or not. Okay, so during this time, you have patent pending status. And again, I have a lot of clients they're getting investment based off of patent pending status. You don't need to have an issued patent. Don't wait to get an issued patent to be approaching investors, to be starting to sell the product. So people will be, selling a ton of the product. They'll even sometimes license it or sell the company to somebody else, even in the middle of the examination process or before it's even started. So doing all this expensive speculative analysis about, is it going to be patentable? What's the prior art and all this kind of stuff? It's a waste because you don't need that analysis to get you from point A to point B. And the folks who think, well, we need to know for sure and we need to do all this analysis, it doesn't make any sense. Now, I would actually argue that doing patent searching is actually going to be more detrimental to growing a company than it is going to be beneficial. So for instance, and I've seen this a lot, so companies do a prior art search really early and they get negative results because of course they are. If you look at, on a broad idea, yeah, there's going to be tons of prior art. And like I said, it's going to take some time to develop the specific details of what the product is going to be, how it really functions, and that's where patentability is. So if they get this negative prior art search at early stages, they're going to say, yeah, we shouldn't go ahead with this company because, the technology isn't going to ultimately be patentable. And that's not true. They haven't developed the patentable stuff yet. And so I've seen this a lot where great ideas end up being abandoned or great companies don't end up getting off the ground just because they do an early prior art search, which is totally worthless. And then it dissuades them from actually going ahead with what could be ultimately a great business or a great product. So one of the main issues with patent searching and patentability analysis is that honestly, these expensive and time-consuming reports don't actually give you any actionable information that is going to help improve patent applications or actually let you make a good decision as to whether to move forward with a product or whether to move forward with a business. Okay, and it comes from some basic misunderstandings of patents and the patent process. So the first thing is people think, well, we can structure the application, we can argue against this prior art, we can show the examiner how good our invention is. And that's really not how examination really works. So you're entitled to a patent unless the examiner can show that there is prior art that makes it not new and obvious over that prior art. And again, it's very subjective. It's very examiner to examiner. So you can do all this analysis, but in the end, it's going to come down to this person that you get assigned to. Okay. I mean, I've seen these reports and they're pretty much the same. I mean, usually what happens is you do the prior art search, come up with a bunch of prior art, and the letter says, well, we found a bunch of prior art. Not a surprise, right? I mean, there's always going to be some relevant prior art. I don't care what the invention is. There's going to be something that's going to be relevant in terms of prior art. So no surprise there. We found some prior art, and we think that an examiner could form obviousness rejections or potentially novelty rejections in view of this prior art. Okay, again, no big surprise. These rejections are a natural part of the examination process. But the problem is you're not going to know until you get in front of that one specific examiner whether you're going to be able to overcome the rejections. And again, usually it's not an issue of whether you can overcome them ultimately. It's whether you can overcome them and have to have a really narrow patent, or whether you're going to be able to overcome them and get a broad patent. So again, in drafting the application, I've seen these analyses, they're effectively worthless. The best thing you can do is just draft your application, have as much detail as possible, and that's what allows you to navigate around the prior art and the specific rejections that this one specific examiner throws at you. One of the reasons that a lot of folks want to do a prior art search and patentability analysis is because they want to have some sort of guarantee that they're going to be able to get an issued patent. They don't want to spend all this money and all this time if they're not going to be able to get a patent. But the problem is that no matter how good of a prior art search you do, you will never be able to find all the prior art out there. One, it's just a practical thing. So again, prior art, yes, it can be issued patents, published applications, and that's easier to search, although still very difficult in a lot of ways. But then there's going to be actual products. There's going to be random blog posts, YouTube videos, any sort of technology disclosure. So practically there's no way to search everything and know for sure that you've found every single piece of potential prior art out there. Two, there's a lot of hidden prior art. And so for instance, with patent applications, by default, they are held in secret for 18 months while they're pending, and potentially up until they actually issue as a patent. So you may be able to do this theoretically perfect patent search, but you know for sure there is hidden prior art out there. There are things that could be completely relevant, that could be exactly what you're doing, or right on point that the examiner is going to cite against you, that have not published yet, that you're not going to be able to know about. So that's another one of the main issues, is there's absolutely no guarantee. You're never going to be able to get a, yes, this is going to be patentable. So I've spent all this time railing against why patent and prior art searching is a total scam and a waste of time or money, but what should you actually do instead? So I always use the analogy of, say, a jug of water and filling a glass. So you only have so much time and so much money that you can put into patent applications and the patent process. And where you're going to get the most return on investment is not the patent and prior art searching and patentability analysis. That's going to be worthless. Where you get the most return on investment is spending a lot of time describing the invention in detail. Because again, when it comes to the examination process, what allows you to navigate around the prior art rejections, which naturally are going to occur during the examination process, what allows you to do that is having all the very specific details of what the invention is, how it works, how it's configured. That is what is going to make it more likely that you're going to be able to get around the rejections that you get, not some sort of speculative prior art searching and somehow trying to figure out, oh, I think that the examiner is going to have these rejections. A lot of times the examiner is going to cite completely different prior art than what comes up in a prior art search. So what you need to do is focus on drafting a really, really good patent application with a lot of details. That's where you should spend your money. That's where you should spend your time. And that's what's going to really increase your chances of overcoming the prior art rejections that you're going to face in the examination process. That being said, I'm not saying at all that you should ignore the issue of patentability, but the way you should address it is just talking with a patent attorney about your invention and asking them about it. A lot of times the best thing that we do is just sort of give a ballpark based on our understanding of technology, because a lot of times we are technology experts in most of these fields, and our experience with the patent process. We can give you a good ballpark sense of, well, I know there's going to be a lot of prior art in this field. I don't know what that is, but I know that it's probably going to be difficult, or you have sort of a general broad idea without a lot of details. It's going to be hard, unless you have those specific details, or, I know that there's a ton of prior, in this field, but when it really comes down to it, you have so many potential points of novelty here that it's very likely you're going to be able to get a patent through. That's the analysis that you want. You just want a ballpark. So instead of going to a patent attorney and saying, hey, I want you to do a prior art search and do this analysis, this should be something that you can talk with a patent attorney about for maybe half an hour, talk about the invention, how it works, and then have them give you sort of a ballpark, maybe a percentage. 50%, 90%, and sort of what their thoughts are and how easy or difficult it's going to be. That's the level of patent searching and analysis that you should be doing. So to be clear, what I am absolutely not saying is that you shouldn't do market research, but doing a prior art search and patentability analysis is completely different than the market research you should be doing. So your business is set up to fail if you don't go out there and say, oh, well, what other businesses or products are out there that are similar to mine? How are they selling those products? What is their price point? Am I going to be able to make and sell a product at a similar price point and be competitive? That's the kind of market analysis that you absolutely need to do. But again, that is completely different than doing a prior art search to determine whether your invention is going to be patentable. That's worthless analysis. But the market analysis about where your product or where your company is going to fit into the market, that is absolutely essential. Now, you still might be saying, okay, well, all right, so I'm not going to hire a patent attorney or a search firm to do prior art searching and patentability analysis, but isn't it fine if I just go ahead and do this myself? Even if it's free, I'm going to use Google Patents or go to the USPTO website. Now, it comes back to sort of the glass example, is you only have so much energy and so much time to put into your patent application. I would argue that it is a waste of time to do that analysis, even if it's going to be free for you. Again, spend your time coming up with the details of how the invention works, describing that in a technology disclosure that you can give to your patent attorney. That's where your time should actually be spent. So as much as I've talked about how bad and wasteful prior art searching and patentability analysis is, there are some exceptions to that rule. And before I give you that, if you've been getting some value out of this video, please give it a like. It really helps get this video out to more people, and consider sharing it on maybe LinkedIn or something. So the first exception, and where you may actually consider doing a patent search and patentability analysis, is with really, really simple inventions. Things like really simple, basic consumer products. And so there are a couple things here. One is that patentability is probably going to hinge on one really minor thing, okay? And that's going to be the case where it is kind of binary, where you have a patent or you don't. Either that thing is out there or it's not. Okay, and doing a prior art search on something like that isn't typically going to be that expensive. So you may actually consider doing a prior art search on something that is really, really simple. At the same time, I would first consider talking to a patent attorney and saying, hey, here's my invention. What do you think? Because a lot of times they're going to be able to give you a pretty good sense. And they're, again, the patent attorneys are experts in these fields, and they're going to know. It's like, well, yeah, I'm aware of things that are pretty much exactly like this, or things that are really, really close, and so it's probably going to be obvious, even though there's no exact thing like this. Talk to a patent attorney first, but you may consider doing a prior art search if you have a really, really simple invention. The other exception would be if you're working with an extremely inexperienced patent attorney. Now, what I would say is most patent attorneys are going to be able to give you that great ballpark, sort of half an hour, back of the napkin sort of patentability analysis. And that's really all you're going to typically need. But that takes experience. It takes a patent attorney who has gone through the examination process and who has drafted a lot of applications and sort of has a sense of how the examination process works and how to draft really good applications. They're going to be able to navigate around the prior art later on in examination. So if you're working with somebody who doesn't have that experience, they're not going to be able to do that sort of ballpark estimate of whether your invention is going to be patentable. Again, an experienced patent attorney is going to be able to have a pretty good sense of those things and is going to give you a ballpark estimate, but an inexperienced attorney probably won't. The reality is that any business venture is gonna have its inherent risks, and patents are just one of those things. So don't let patent attorneys somehow sell you on doing patentability analysis and prior art searching to somehow give you a guarantee that you're gonna be able to get a patent, or somehow sleep better at night because you feel better about investing this time and money into a product or into a business. There is still gonna be no guarantee. So don't be fooled and let somebody take advantage of your insecurity, your fear, or your inexperience by somehow telling that you have to do a patent or prior art search.